Welcome to Season 4 of the Lehigh Valley Arts Podcast, where we explore the local arts culture and community in the Lehigh Valley.
We'll be doing this through conversations with individual artists, administrators, musicians, poets, actors, and arts and cultural organizations. We'll discuss all types of mediums with the goal of enriching local arts culture.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Lehigh Valley Arts Podcast. I'm Ben, and this week, Elise and I will be interviewing Derick Fiedler. Growing up, Derick never saw his father without a camera in his hand. His father's passion for photography inspired him to become a photographer himself. After graduating from college, Derick made backpacking throughout the world his top priority. He took with him his father's Olympus mirrorless camera and a 20mm lens that could easily fit into his backpack. Derick traveled throughout the U.S. and places such as Spain, the Sahara Desert, Thailand, the Galapagos Islands, and Peru, where he captured moments of beauty, places, people, and cultures. Behind each photograph is a story that means everything to Derick. After the pandemic, Derick switched gears and was able to combine his love of music and photography. He now photographs DIY live music shows and band portraits in the greater Philadelphia area.
Derick, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, excited to have you on. We've been hearing your name and wanting to have you on for a very long time.
Well,
I love that.
We've been hearing your stage name.
Well, yeah, that's very true. We've been hearing Tumbleweed mentioned over and over and over again, just kind of tumbling through every episode.
We're like, who is this guy? He's an enigma.
Oh, man. Yeah.
But yeah, we're so glad to have you on.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be
Yeah.
here.
So, Derick, what do you do?
I'm a photographer, mostly known now for music photography, live music, and portraits. But I started off as like a street photographer, traveling photographer
Awesome.
in my 20s.
Awesome. And when do you think you first picked up a camera?
It was in high school for photo class, but my father has been a photographer my entire life, most of his entire life. If my dad wasn't taking photos, he was editing them on the computer. Like that is his love. Even when he was working while he was in college, actually where he met my mother was like Hill's department store. It's not around anymore, but it was a department store. He worked in the electronics place to work with cameras. And then he went to school and double majored in business and photography. So it's always just been around my life. So that's what really motivated me to take the photography classes in high school. And then photography almost all my hobbies kind of took to the wayside in college because I ran track in college, and it took so much of my time. I loved it. It was great.
You weren't like running and taking blurry
right.
photos as you ran.
It was my dad was taking photos at our me and my brother's athletic events. Yeah, he was the one taking the pictures at that time. But it didn't matter if that was that or nature. He still does a lot of like landscape stuff, but that is his absolute love and joy. And the only reason I have any equipment is because of him. So he's always helping me out.
That's fun.
Yeah.
What was your first camera that you started with?
An Olympus mirrorless. It's an OMD.
Nice.
And it was my dad gave it to me. I only had a 20mm for it, so I was only just shooting in 20mm. And actually, a lot of my travel photography is with that camera.
Oh, very cool.
It was just when I traveled, I only traveled with just a backpack. It was a carry-on. I didn't bring anything else with me, so it was something that was compact and like fit my bag and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, so you mentioned growing up, you've mentioned college, and you do shows. So fill me in on the timeline a little bit between when did you do that traveling and how long was that for?
So it started my senior year of college. I was an environmental science major, and there was an opportunity to do a research project in the Badlands, South Dakota. And I had rarely traveled in my life up till then. I had a lot of anxiety about leaving the house, things like that. I had a lot of these fears. And So when I got to college, I through my major, I was seeing these landscapes and all that stuff, and I was like, I really need to go see this. I need to go do this. Like, I can't let my anxiety just hold me back from these things that I find so interesting. So I kind of fought through that, and I did this trip to the Badlands, and it was like 2 weeks staying in tents, no cell phone service, and it changed my life. And I all of a sudden, the same way my dad had an obsession with photography, like I just became obsessed with traveling. I graduated in 2014, and it was just priority number one. I was urgent about it, and I wasn't ready to settle down and, go into any kind of career or anything like that. I was reading Jack Kerouac. I was, watching different documentaries and movies about traveling. I was just like, this is it. So then I started off in the United States, and me and my best friend, we did a road trip around the United States, and we just stayed in my car and traveled around, stuff like that. And then it would be, what I would do is I would bartend for a while, and then like every 6 months I'd go to a different country for about a month or two. And that was kind of my thing for all of my 20s, basically, from like 22 to 29.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
How many countries did you get to visit in that time?
I'd have to, it would take me a moment. I've been to every continent but Australia and Antarctica.
Wow.
I did mostly South America though. So Costa Rica, Ecuador, Peru, Galapagos Islands was probably one of my favorite down there too. I've backpacked a lot of Europe. I started like up north and made my way south. And then Thailand was one of my other favorite as well. But
very cool.
Yeah.
Is there anywhere that you visited or been that you had like expectations going into it, but it like really surprised you?
The Sahara Desert in Morocco. So I wanted to do that trip more as like a challenge, and challenge myself, try to do something difficult. And I found the Sahara Desert to be absolutely beautiful. It was as if like there was sand as big as mountains, and it was as if like a silk cloth like just ran forever. It just blew me away. It was incredible, and I really didn't think that was gonna be something so beautiful as it was, just like a challenge to ride camels through the desert.
That's super fun.
So
that is super cool.
Yeah. And I have to ask about the food. Like, where was the best food?
Thailand.
Of course.
Yeah.
I expected you to say that.
It was they just use so many different ingredients, and just like the way they mix and mash it and stuff. And and a lot of Americans don't think about this or know this about traveling, but like the American dollar goes so far. Like this was, before COVID, of course, so I don't know anymore, but $1 American dollar is like 3 Thai dollars, which is called baht. So like the average meal is $1 American dollar.
Wow.
So like it was crazy.
Yeah, one night of bartending will go a long way.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. A hostel was about $5 a night. One of my favorite pictures I took was we rode motorbikes up this mountain in Chiang Mai, and at the top was, I can't pronounce the name of the temple, but it's an all gold temple, and the motorbike that we rented was like, I think it was $10 for 24 hours or something like that. So it was like, if you would have to try really hard to spend a lot of money while you were there. I think the plane ticket would be the most expensive part.
Understandable.
So
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned that your goal was traveling. How did the photography play into that?
It was something more in the beginning, just trying to create the memories, and then after I started taking them and bringing them home, I realized it was something like unique and special to to document this stuff. So, and I kind of liked the same way I like traveling to like places that were a little, iffy or like not feeling totally safe. Like I liked the adrenaline rush of like taking photos where maybe like you shouldn't be taking photos, not that you shouldn't be taking photos, but like I would shoot from the hip. Like I had my camera, I had that Olympus.
Yeah.
So what I would do is I would keep it at my hip. Like I'm not taking any pictures of,
Absolutely.
anything I see in the street that might be a good photo or anything like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, able to be really covert with it too.
yeah, absolutely. And not
Yeah.
I didn't want anyone posing. I really wanted to capture,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
I'm always I find street photography like so fantastically interesting, and I work in a museum where like there's a good chunk of our collection is like there's a lot of street photography, and like one of the things that we talk about a lot is like the ethics of street photography, and like where does that come in when you are an outsider visiting other cultures or experiencing or meeting people that you wouldn't usually run into, and like where do these photographs end up? And I'm curious, like as someone who was traveling and kind of like experiencing a lot of this from the outside, like how did you maintain that kind of like ethical practice of like immersing yourself in a way that was really respectful, but also like getting to capture all of your own art like while doing it?
Every country was a little different. In Morocco, it was especially like Muslim culture, they're much more different about getting their picture taken than in Thailand. They were like, yeah, take a picture of me. And I would always assume, especially in Morocco, I'd ask permission first, and then they would want payment. They would want you to pay them for their picture, and I expected that. So that was one way that I kept the ethics. And I had people that were like, "No, thank you," and I respect that. And I go, "Okay," I'm like, "Darn, that would have been good."
Yeah,
but so it is definitely a fine line, right? But a lot of the cultures, especially South America and Asia, they were super open to it. They kind of wanted their picture taken, and they didn't expect payment as much. They just were happy to be a part of it. But yeah, in other places, not so much.
Yeah, it's fascinating too, like this idea of just trying to capture, you said like being covert and capture like something that's not posed.
Right.
And like how do you kind of narrow down, like this is such a like ridiculously broad question, but like how do you go from like, okay, I'm walking down the street, I'm enjoying the sights, to like, okay, I'm gonna stop and I'm gonna pause and I'm gonna take a photograph?
I really, sometimes it's funny because one of my favorite pictures I ever took was from my iPhone, because I was walking and it happened so fast that my brain just went, that's a good picture, that I didn't have the time to get my camera out of the bag and all that stuff. I took it with my phone. And so I don't know, it's kind of like you just know, when you know. And sometimes it's always like, for me, it's like especially traveling, it was like when you least expected it. It was like if I had the camera out, I'm looking too hard for it. And then other times it's, it's right there in front of you. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this would be good. And I only had time to just get my phone up before the moment went by, Yeah.
I know this is kind of a question for both of you as photographers, but like personally, I can't think of anything more stressful than trying to create good street photography, photograph live events. It would literally spike my anxiety through the roof because there's such a narrow window of like perfection for like a good photo. How do you manage that? Like, how do you kind of navigate this? Like you have such a narrow point of time to like do it. A narrow margin of error.
How much have you done with live event photography, like outside of, let's say, the concert scene?
Pretty much strictly the concert scene. But I know we talked about this kind of before the podcast about wedding photography and not missing those moments.
Yeah, wedding photography is a really interesting one because you're allowed to put yourself anywhere, and so it's different from street photography in that it is about the people. I mean, you may have very differing thoughts on what the essence or meaning behind street photography is, but for me, it's always been less about the people themselves and more about capturing actions, movement, and culture.
Yes, I agree with that.
And so when it comes to, in my mind, what it means to do
the ethical thing behind it. If you're making it too much about those people and those people in that photo become the forefront, that's not ethical because they did not consent to that. But it's hard for a culture to consent to something, right? And so if you're preserving culture and thinking about the culture in that way, then it becomes much more ethical. On the contrary, something like live event photography does also tend to focus more on the people,
Right.
and
if
the
pressure of someone paying you and
Yeah,
being like, there's an expectation.
absolutely,
For me, the anxiety, that was what we were talking about, right? The anxiety of like making sure
the pressure of it.
The live events, absolutely, especially when I first started, and I mean even now, but like every time you go to a live music event, you have no idea what the lighting is going to be.
Yeah,
you know, and it's in live music events, the lighting is the worst you could ever deal with, and then making sure that the pictures aren't blurry, and then like you have this anxiety of like this stage fright of like you have your back to the entire audience. You're the only but it's the band's audience behind you. You're like, they're watching me. Am I blocking their view? Are they mad at me? Is the flash annoying the musicians? Like all that stuff. And you're like, I only have a half hour or like however long the set is to make sure I got it. I'm like, oh my gosh, did I do it right? You know what I mean? So, and then you kind of don't know until the show starts. You don't really know what your settings should be. Like before the show, you can try to have a guess, but then all of a sudden the lights turn off and there's crazy blue and red and yellow and flashing and smokes. It's crazy. So there's definitely a lot of stress. But I've asked so many bands, like, does the flash bother you or annoy you? And they're like, I don't even know what you're talking about, because they're like so focused on like what they're doing and stuff.
They've got their own anxieties going.
Yeah, exactly. They're so worried about what's going on.
Yeah.
So, and at the end of the day, if they're paying you to do something, like, I don't have as much fear anymore, at least, of feeling like I'm disrupting someone in the audience or anything like that. Of course, I try to move around like a ghost to make sure I'm not getting in the way of anything. But,
so when a band commissions you to do some live at a concert photos, what is the expectation for delivery on something like that?
As far as like timeline?
More like what on average are you looking to give to them out of,
I want to give them something that just makes them like so excited to share it or use it for their own promotion, things like that. I keep two different cameras. I have a camera with a fisheye lens, and then I have a regular lens. So I try to go back and forth between those during the set and things like that. I try to get them like at least a minimum of 30 good photos, no matter how long or short the set is.
Yeah.
And then I do think, especially for live music and like the Instagram world, the social media world we live in, like I want to get their photos done in at least 3 days. Like no more than, I don't want to take any more than 3 days.
Yeah.
I usually try to do it in 24, 48 hours, because it's like they want photos for shows from that night. And some bands are playing 2 or 3 shows a week.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So they're like, we don't want to post these pictures from 3 shows ago, So I think getting things done in a timely manner is important for live music.
Do you change your mindset when it comes to editing based on the subject material that you're shooting?
Yeah, definitely. Something for like a punk band in a basement versus like an acoustic set at the Ice House or at Godfrey Daniels, definitely.
Yeah.
I would use something like the fisheye lens, or I have an art filter that is like on my Olympus that makes like a real grainy black and white, so I'll like use that and things like that. So
that's super fun.
Yeah.
Is that a discussion that you have like with the band beforehand, or do you kind of like go and listen to the show and talk to them and listen to the music and like decide your style and editing based on like
more the
how
latter,
it goes?
But if I'm doing like a formal photo shoot, I really want to make sure I'm getting what they're asking for. So I ask them, can you send me like examples of what you're looking for, like of other bands' photo shoots or of other vibes of just pictures you like, the color, the setting, and I'll go, okay, based on that, why don't we shoot here, at this location or that location, based off So in that sense, I really try to grasp that.
Nice.
That's cool. So you mentioned you've been to almost every continent, bar Australia and Antarctica.
Yes.
But there's a funny thing with Antarctica, isn't there, when it comes to concert shoots?
There's no stages there.
Well, but who was the first band that you shot?
Oh, we're from Antarctica.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. This is true. I might be able to get them to go on the trip with me. You know?
I think there's something kind of funny and ironic there about needing to travel all over the world just to not visit Antarctica, and then the first band that you shoot has the name of the continent that you haven't visited.
I didn't put those two together, but that is hilarious.
Very astute.
That is. I did not put that together. That's hilarious. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
There's a
man.
sign there.
Yeah. What do you think you took away from your travels that you were able to apply to the concert photography side of things?
Traveling really healed me as far as my mental health goes, and building confidence, and not having so much fear about public spaces and things like that. So I think, like, in a sense, it helped me be a little fearless as far as, like, because you have to kind of not care about your surroundings, because it is like tiptoeing, at least in the beginning, with doing live shows, because it can be pressure of like, oh my God, are people looking at me? Am I annoying people? Am I in their way? This and that. And so, I always joke, like, but kind of serious, like, traveling is the best therapy and education I ever got. Really helped me calm my anxieties and helped with my depression for sure. So.
Well, we've been, talking on and off about travel and your experiences while traveling. I'd love to hear some more about your adventures while traveling.
Yeah. I love to live for the stories. It's probably, I have it pulled up here. One of my favorite travel stories that also involves photography was, one of the reasons I really wanted to go to Morocco was to take pictures of the snake charmers with the vipers on, like, the rugs, It was our first, like, full day in Morocco, and we were in Marrakesh, and they had this huge area with just, like, different merchants and stuff like that. And in Morocco, how do I word this? They're very aggressive in their sales. Like, they approach you and try to pull you in. So I see them and I have my camera, and they're like, oh, tourists, So we're walking over, me and my buddy Andrew, who I was traveling with, we walk over to the snake charmers, and this guy, like, who's, like, kind of in charge of probably, collecting money from tourists and stuff like that. Because I knew, like I said earlier, like, I was going to have to pay this guy after I took the photos, So, and I fully understood that. And he put this snake around my neck, and he, like, wanted me to take pictures of, like, us together with the snake around my neck. And I was like, no, like, I'm more interested in, like, candid pictures. Like, I want to just take pictures without me in it, like, of the, of the charmers and the snake themselves. And I'm on one knee and I'm trying to take pictures like the ones I want. And he was just trying so hard. And he was, like, poking me and, like, let me see your phone. Like, I'll get a picture of you. And I'm like, no, I'm okay. Like, I don't want that. And he kept bothering me and, like, physically poking me for so long that I was like, all right, I'm going to give my phone to my buddy Andrew. He'll take a picture. Maybe this guy will, like, chill out. So I give my phone to my buddy Andrew. And he tries to pull my phone out of Andrew's hand, and Andrew's just looking at me. And meanwhile, like, my heart's going like 1,000,000 miles an hour, and, like, in the background you just hear the charmers, like, and I'm like, you know what? Like, let's be done here. Like, we're done. Like, this is just getting too much. Like, So I was like, here's your snake back. Like, 'cause I had the snake around my neck, like, while I was still taking pictures
Oh my
of
gosh.
the snake around my neck wasn't a cobra. The rest of the ones on the ground were.
Yeah.
And because I just, whatever. I'm like, here's it back. Like, we're good. You know, we're done here. And he's like, pay me. And I'm like, all right. So I give him like the equivalent of like $4 American, maybe 5. And he's like, no, give me more. And I was like, I'm like, how much do you want? And he wanted more. I can't remember exactly the equivalent, but he wanted more than like my taxi and the hostel like the night before combined. And I was like, this guy's trying to rip me off. And he starts poking me in the stomach, and I'm like, take this, or not in the stomach, in the chest. And he's like, you pay me. And I'm like, here, just take this. And he wouldn't take it. And then he wanted me to, he started grabbing my camera, and he said, delete, like, you delete the pictures, like, because you're not paying me enough. And meanwhile, like, this charm music's still going on in the background. Like, my heart's, I'm like, am I going to get, whatever. I was so scared. And suddenly this guy walks by, and he's like nicely dressed in a collared shirt, and he has these glasses on. And right when that guy walked by, suddenly this guy just changed his pace and took the money and walked away. And we were like, oh, it was like the feeling you got after you just got in a car accident. I was like, oh my God. And we went back to the hostel, and we told the story to the worker at the hostel, and he said that, because the merchants are very aggressive and they try to like scare tourists into, paying more and stuff like that, they have undercover cops that walk around to keep them chilled out so that these things don't happen.
So that's who walked by.
That's who walked by is what we
my
think. We described him. He's like, that sounds about right. It was probably an undercover cop trying to keep it all under control. So those were the only pictures I got of that was the best I could do with the situation I was in.
Oh my goodness.
So that was probably one of my favorite travel stories that ties in the camera to the incident.
Well, before we move on from that story, when it comes to looking at the photo after the fact, right, and that being one of the ones that you choose to put as a highlight from that session, what about that photo really sticks out to you?
Honestly, the story behind it. I know maybe that sounds like too like general or whatever, but it's really just the story behind it. And like, I don't know, my grandfather was always a big storyteller, like just big mouth. My dad's the same way. I think I just love telling stories. And so probably that sticks out the most. It's like, you wouldn't believe how this picture. And I actually have other pictures of, not on me at this moment, but you can see his hand like going like this towards me. Like I must have just kept hitting the button by accident, and you can literally see the guy's hand like this, like, give me the money, So those ones I keep on a file on the computer. But
that's so funny.
Yeah, it's amazing, like, how much is behind like, you have no idea what's going on behind a photograph that someone takes or posts on Instagram or puts at a gallery. Like, you've absolutely no clue. And it's kind of hilarious that, like, the extent of which it made me think of I don't know, like, in the last 10 or 15 years, like, if either of you have been to the Love statue in Philadelphia, like in Love Park, where there's like a very similar vibe going on, where for many years there were these guys that would kind of hover around the statue. And like, if tourists went up to get their photo taken, they would have 2 guys. One guy would offer to take your photo and then would take off with your cell phone.
Yep.
And it's like, I wonder how many like photos are out there on someone's cloud of like this guy running away with their phone. Or, like it's so
in other
funny,
countries,
but,
you got to be really careful about that. And I don't know if he was gonna do that, but like, he was trying to reach for my phone. I'm like, what is going on here? Like I'm not falling for this one.
Yeah.
But Philly is kind of otherworldly sometimes,
Oh,
but
man.
yeah, you never know like what's going on behind the lens.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh man. Any other stories in that? Not necessarily the same vein, but
Kind of, yeah. So when I was in Spain, I went to the Running with the Bulls.
Oh, very cool.
And I didn't even like plan on being there during the festival. it just kind of happened. And so the night before the Running with the Bulls Fest, the coolest thing about staying in hostels is that, like, you can sit down and have a conversation with one person from Sweden, one person from China, two people from or Mexico City in Mexico, someone from France, and just like talk about everything, anything. And it's very encouraged to talk to strangers, to just walk right up to people. Like it's one of my favorite things. So like you would meet people that night and be like, hey, you want to go Running with the Bulls tomorrow together or something like that. So I met this guy named Isaac, and he was from Sweden. And it was the summer. It was like 95 degrees. There's no air conditioning in this hostel. It was a rough one. We went out partying till like really late. So the next morning we like meet with like a group from the hostel. We're all gonna go take the train over there together. And we're all dehydrated and like hungover and stuff, and we're getting there, and we walked by this ambulance, and we were like, oh, better make sure none of us like need that today. And so a bunch of people that came with us start getting in line to get some beers, and me and this guy Isaac were like, oh, we need like a Gatorade or a water or something. Like, we're gonna go to this like little shop. So we go to this little shop, and Isaac's standing there, and it was like something out of a bad dream. Like all of a sudden he started like clenching his arms, and he falls back, and he starts having a seizure. And I remembered the ambulance that we were like, oh, hope we don't end up in that, running there, and I didn't speak much Spanish, and I was just like, emergency, and like they came back, and they had to, take care of him. And I told you, like, I have a lot of like really bad anxiety, and like part of why I travel is to like overcome it. And all of a sudden there was just this flood of like, what are you doing in another country alone by yourself? And I was on the ground, like I was kind of crying. I was crying, like worried about him. I didn't know what happened, and these nuns started splashing water on my head and like blessing me. Like, it was crazy. And so Isaac gets pulled out on a stretcher, and they're taking him towards the ambulance, and I was like, do you want me to go with you? And he's like, no, you got to go to the Running with the Bulls. Like, you have to go. And I was like, are you sure? And he was like, yeah, I'll find you later. Like, So I went to Running with the Bulls after that, like I wanted to really just get, like, I was so freaked out. I wanted to like let my anxiety just kind of take over. And whatever. Fun fact, Isaac was on Love Island after that. Not before, but after that, he ended up on the show.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Yeah. So I was like, do you want me to go to the hospital with you? He was like, you got to go, man. You got to go. So I ended up getting one of my favorite pictures I ever took. You know the term like grab the bull by the horns, like dodge? That's a real thing. So like you're considered a man if you can grab the bull by the horn while it's running by. So a lot of these guys were trying to grab the bull by the horn when it was running by.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So in the photograph, we see it was like the aftermath of one of the guys trying to like kind of grab it as it ran by.
Yeah. And they what they do is they bar off the street. So there's these like jail cell bars you can almost see, right? And it's just enough space for the people to get in and out, but the bull not to be able to. But the problem is, if there's too many people all trying to get through that bar all at the same time, not everyone's gonna get through. So that was a big problem. And then the other fascinating thing I found was the way that they get the bulls back is they bring out a mother, a mom, a mother bull. I don't know what you would call that. Heifer, I think. I don't know. But they would see her and they would run to her. And that's how they drew them back into their whatever to take them away after the event.
Fascinating.
So I always thought that was really interesting too.
So what's the aftermath? If someone grabs the bull by the horns, like what's the aftermath of that? They just like let go?
Yeah, they just grab it and let go, I think. It was like what I saw, they grab it and they let go. And the other thing too is like it's another ethical thing, right? But they've been doing this for hundreds of years. The bulls are so scared.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
terrified. They don't. So like when they grab them by the horn, like sometimes, yeah, maybe they're gonna gouge them or whatever.
Sure.
But sometimes they're just trying to get away. You know what I mean? Like run to safety or anything like that.
Yeah.
But
I was picturing like someone like hanging on, like
Yeah.
flailing behind kind of
yeah,
thing.
there was another one of like, and there were some people who had a lot more confidence than other people that were really
That's
really,
awesome.
really going for it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I love, especially given the perception, like anybody that's in a high school Spanish class will hear about the running of the bulls. But this image that we're looking at right now shows like such a contrary nature to all the things that we see and hear about what happens at the running of the bulls.
Yeah.
There's a bull standing sideways in an alley and a bunch of kids and adults just like looking, yelling, and having a great time near it.
Yeah.
But it's like so stationary. Yeah.
But it's so stationary.
Nobody freaks out till it's too late.
Yeah.
They all think it's gonna happen to somebody else. You know? And I think like there's bleachers for people who just want to watch, and then I think like the people that actually go down there and start running, like I stayed close. I did go out. I stayed close to the bar. I said sorry, Mom. But yeah, my poor mother on all these trips, like took some years off her life, I think.
Oh, I could imagine.
But yeah, those are probably two of my favorite stories from my photos.
That's
Definitely.
awesome.
Yeah, you have quite a great collection of photos, and this comes up a lot, like kind of this idea of art and social media, and like what do you feel is the role of like sharing out these images that you have and that you've collected for other people to see?
So I enjoy it because it's not about me and my face and like who I am. It's not about Derick. It's about the photograph. So like it always bothered me with social media. I used to like speak about mental health on stages. And the thing I didn't like about it was like it being about me and my face and my name. I just wanted I like with photography that it just speaks for itself, and that's what it is, and it has nothing to do with me, anything like that, or my character. It's just the photo and what you think of it. So I really don't mind. I enjoy sharing it on social media, but I also like, and I think I can admit that I'm human like everyone else. Like getting likes and shares and all that isn't a reflection of how good your art is, or if it's value or anything like that. And I think sometimes that's a challenge for artists in 2024 to overcome that, right? Because like, I mean, there's some amazing stuff that only so many people could see. You know what I mean? Some of it's just luck or whatever, But yeah, trying to like I do enjoy it. I try not to get too caught up in it, which is definitely easier said than done. But
Understandable.
Yeah. So as your kind of travels or this period of like traveling kind of came to a close, where did you kind of look to next for what you were going to be working on?
So I was doing the international traveling up until COVID. And then during COVID, I decided to just stick around the United States and continue doing it that way. And the last place I was in Colorado as a ski tech. I was working in Breckenridge as a ski tech. And I was like 28, 29. And I just had this realization. I was living in this employee housing, and a lot of the people I was living with, like partying was just really a big centerpiece of it and all this stuff. And I thought I'd be one of the younger people that were one of the oldest people that were going to be in this employee housing. And I actually wasn't. I was like in the middle, and I was just kind of like, I got my fill. I did it. I got my FOMO out. I'm ready for this next chapter of life. I'm ready for stability now. Because it was a trade. I was willing. The people were like, "Oh, how could you afford to travel and do all this stuff?" It was because I was willing to be uncomfortable to travel, You know, I didn't have any stability. I had 3 boxes to my name all the time, which is really freeing and liberating. But then it just got to a point where I got full. I got enough out of it. And I was like, if I continue to do this, it's not going to be satisfying anymore. I'm ready to settle down. So I decided to go to graduate school and get a degree in clinical mental health counseling. And that's how I ended up here in the Lehigh Valley. I'm from Erie, Pennsylvania originally. And all my traveling really taught me another thing was people over places. Like the mountains in the Rockies, or, you know, the Pacific Northwest with all the green and all the beautiful stuff. It doesn't replace people and relationships. It loses its like charm, and eventually you're just living in this place. And so that's why I decided to come back to Pennsylvania. Was I wanted to be close enough to my family and to the people I grew up around to get home for holidays and events and stuff like that. I also think that's why I broke up traveling, like coming home, bartending, and then going international for just a month or 2 at a time instead of just staying and continuing to do that. So yeah, I ended up here. I'm at Kutztown University right now. They were specialized in the degree I was looking for. Yeah. And now, like going back to school at 30, like I felt right on time. I don't feel like I'm behind. I'm like, all right, like, cause if I would have done this if I would have gone straight to grad school, like after undergrad, I would have cold feet. I was a lot more immature. I might have had other distracting priorities, blah, blah, blah. And then I would have gotten my career and been like, oh God, like, why didn't I travel in my 20s when I could have, you know, and try to do it the opposite way. So I feel much more confident about being stable, having that stability and all that stuff now. And that's how I ended up here.
Yeah. And why the Lehigh Valley? Like, I know you could live out in Kutztown, you could live out in Central PA, you could kind of commute back and forth, but what do you like about the Lehigh Valley?
If you haven't been able to tell, I'm like really impulsive. So like I didn't want to live in Kutztown because, like, you know, I'm a little older. I'm 32 and I want to live like in civilization. So I like kind of I kind of put a finger on a map and I was like, oh, Bethlehem looks pretty cool. Like, I'd never been there, but it looks like there's like stuff from the Google Maps. It looks like there's something going on here. So I found an apartment out here, and then also like geographically, I was like, all right, you have the Pocono Mountains for like skiing. I said you're an hour and a half from New York and Philly. My brother's an hour from here. My cousin's an hour in Harrisburg away. And then, you know, I didn't want to live in my hometown, but like I'm like, all right, it's close enough I can get home for emergencies and stuff like that. So it kind of just felt like geographically a place to give a chance. So I was like, let's find out what happens. And I love Bethlehem. I love this place. Like, I will be here after I graduate for sure. I'm definitely gonna stick around.
That's awesome.
I love describing Kutztown as somewhere that's uncivilized. Like, something about that's so hilarious.
Well, I mean, as someone as well traveled as you, I guess you'd know.
I was just like driving out that way yesterday. And I was like, this is the boonies. Like, I've been in the boonies, but like this is like in my head. I'm like, oh God.
There's not
like, where's the gas station?
Yeah, there's not much going on.
No offense to all you.
That's all states.
Kutztownites.
All state schools. I feel like it's like a rule. It has to be in the middle of nowhere for you to have a school.
I wonder if it's like the thought process is like, if it's out here in the middle of nowhere, no one will get in trouble. And then it's like, then you just like my brother went to state college, and like I think people just create the trouble.
Right.
Like out in these isolated.
Because what else even harder?
Yeah, because there's nothing else to do. Yeah.
Right.
Oh man,
that's funny.
Well, how long after being in the Lehigh Valley did it take you to transition into concert stuff?
So I had been here about a year and a half, and I didn't go to live music for me was something that like started when I was like in 5th grade, my cousin took me, she worked at like a music hall, and she took me to my first punk show in 5th grade. And I still remember, not only do I still remember the name of the first punk band I ever saw was Hank Jones, but I still have the CD in the case, like to this day. And like that like changed everything for me.
That's awesome.
So like, I had only been doing photos like mostly when I traveled before I came to the Valley. And I hadn't traveled in a while because of COVID, and I was settling down with school and stuff. So like my camera kind of got pushed off to the side. And one particular night, my neighbor downstairs, who became a really good friend of mine, him and his friend were over at the house, and he saw my travel photography on the wall, and he was like, "Hey, I'm a musician. Like, I want to do this like jazz theme photo shoot. Like, would you want to do it for me? Your photos look really cool." I was like, "Yeah, that sounds like fun." I'm like, "Sure." So I got dusted off my camera, and he came over, and this was like a really important night for me, for more than one reason. It was the first night I picked up my camera in well over a year, and then it was the last time I ever drank alcohol as well. We did this photo shoot, and we were like, I was just having so much fun with it and all this stuff, and I'm like, man, this is really cool. And I actually made Tumbleweed Photographer Instagram that night.
Wow.
And it like gave me this idea of like revamping, like, oh, this is something I can lean into, right? And so we were drinking while we were doing the shoot. We went out after, and I had been talking about quitting drinking for like a long time. And I finally just had one last bad night. And I just woke up and I was like, I'm done. And it'll be October 8th will be a year and 6 months.
Wow, congrats.
So a year and a half.
That's awesome.
And when I decided to quit drinking for good, I was like, there's this book by Johan Hari called Lost Connections. And he talks about the opposite of addiction, the opposite of depression is connection to something or someone. So like, you can't just quit drinking and be like, all right, I'm going to sit here and twiddle my thumbs and I'm going to not drink. Here I am not drinking. It was like, I got to replace it with something. So it was like, all right, how do I replace drinking? And how do I still socialize? How do I make friends? And I have no idea. I have no idea how I found it. I can't, it was something through Instagram, but I found We're from Antarctica. And I messaged them. I was like, hey, can I take pictures for you guys tonight at the Flying V? I didn't know where the Flying V was, any of that. I had somehow just found it through the power of Instagram or divine intervention maybe, because like the only place, my next place I needed to go is from Antarctica.
Yeah.
So I go to the show, and the first person I meet and have a conversation with is Ryan Susko. And Ryan Susko is someone who's like very involved in the music and art scene in Lehigh Valley and Philadelphia. He manages We're from Antarctica, and then he also manages a few other bands. He's in charge of a lot of stuff at the Ice House. He does the punk rock flea market, and we just became really amazing friends after that too. He gets me photo passes for stuff. I don't know how he does these things, but he's going places, I'm telling you. So yeah, that was the first time I took photos was for them, and the rest just kind of fell into place. It was amazing. It was like, and if I hadn't quit drinking, I wouldn't have found photography and wouldn't have found this community. I wouldn't be doing this podcast right now if I didn't quit. So it was incredible. If anyone's out there afraid to let go of alcohol or any kind of substance or bad, you have no idea the doors that can open on the other side of that. So it was the best decision I ever made. And not like, aside from just like photos, like the community in Lehigh Valley is so special. The music community here, it's so unique. I've lived all over the country, and the community here is just so strong, and everyone's very supportive of each other. It's not cliquey. I've lived in places where, like, let's say Portland, Oregon, like, people are too cool for each other, or like they'll go out of their way to ignore you, like if they don't know who you are. But here it's just like everyone is just like a family, and I can go to any show And I know I'm going to see, I don't even have to message them, see if they're going to be there. I know I'll see 5-10 people I know. And it's just like friends came out of the woodwork, like just people that are like my brothers now, you know? So it's been amazing. It's been incredible. I'm having so much fun and making so many good friends. It's just like, that's been the best part of all of this has been the friends I've made through this. So
I want to hear more about some of those friends.
yeah. So, food truck has become like my brothers. I actually live with them now. So, and I'm kind of like their designated photographer. So like I get to live vicariously through them, travel and stuff. And the past year has been, you know, we've talked outside this, like a very challenging year for me. And these guys were just like my rocks, like help me out and keep me going. So the food truck guys have been amazing. Like I said, Ryan, Susko, we're my brother below, Yusuf, who's in the band. His nickname's Moose. This is another crazy, like, just like the stars aligned. I met him playing disc golf. He was on the hole in front of me. And we were like, do you want to play together? He was like, yeah, sure. So we play together. And we finish, and we exchanged numbers. We didn't, like, contact each other ever again. And then I was playing by myself, and I found a disc in the woods, and it had his name on it with his number. And I texted him. I was like, hey, I found your disc, blah, 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 blah. Oh, that's cool, man. Like, let's meet up tomorrow, and I'll give it to you or whenever, right? So I had a show at the Flying V that night, and we're standing out front of the show in between bands, and we're looking at each other. And I'm like, you look really familiar. Like, where do I know you from? And it was him. It was Moose. Like, and we've been best friends ever since.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
When it comes to venues, really, like lighting and environments make for interesting pictures.
Definitely.
What have been some of your favorite places locally to shoot in?
Well, I think any musician listening that's from the Valley is going to say the Funhouse first and foremost. I wouldn't say it's exactly for the lighting, but the background of it is pretty great. Yeah. The lighting is quite challenging. Yeah. But like, I think the Funhouse is like the glue, because like they just have live music all the time. They're really supportive. They pay the bands well. They take care of them, and that's just kind of like where all the musicians like hang out and stuff. Yeah. So I like that venue, and there's always people. Like there's always a crowd. I don't think it's ever been thin when you go see.
I've never been there where I haven't been like touched on all sides of my body.
Exactly. Seriously. So that's definitely, I think, the number one spot. And then, you know, we have the Flying V, which they're super supportive of a lot of bands, especially getting bands from out of town to come in and stuff like that. Ice House is doing a really great job. I think they're doing a lot of really cool stuff. I like the Ice House's aesthetic too, the lighting and everything in there. And then Sokol throws shows; those are cool, and like they allow the bands to rent out the space to like. So it's not like some other venues where you have to get the gatekeeper or someone to say yes or no. Like there, you can tell them you want to throw your own show and pay the rental fee and stuff like that.
That's awesome.
So,
yeah.
Are there any places that you've yet to shoot that you are very eager to shoot at?
I go to Philly a lot for shows. My favorite venue there is the Milk Boy. That's a fun venue. They have a good mixture of like, it's kind of this like the next step up, I think, where like it's where bigger bands and smaller bands can open for bigger bands and like get that kind of like interaction, right? Where some of the venues it's like untouchable for like local stuff to get there. Where like the Milk Boy is kind of like this happy medium where like local bands can open up for a bigger band and things like that. And I kind of honestly, I prefer like the basement shows and like the DIY stuff. House venues. Philly's got a lot of different house venues. Yeah, I think they make for more interesting pictures. Like, and I think there's just a different energy. There's something about the energy of like DIY basement shows that just like a stage can't make that. I don't know. It's just more intimate. You know what I mean? Yeah. And there's less rules. It's less formal, you know? So that's honestly, as much as it's really exciting and fun to take pictures of like, you know, the biggest bands there are at like bigger stages like Steel
Sure.
Stacks or, you know, Union Transfer or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I really love the basement shows and the DIY. They just
Mm.
those are by far the most interesting pictures. And on like sideway of that, if you're just to watch a show, you know, so
Thinking back on band photos that you've taken, let's maybe take commissions or paid shoots out of the equation for now. When you're looking back, what are you looking for that constitutes it in your mind as a successful photo or a good photo?
So I think what I like in what I think is a good photo is, I look at two different. I always have this like strategy when I'm doing band photos, of looking not just at like there's the focal point, right?
Yeah.
Say it's like the lead singer, or whatever. I want something going on in the background as well. So what I try to do is like have a loose focus on the whatever's closest, and try to make something interesting also in the background. Follow that. I want like the viewer's eye to move from one to the next, instead of like, here's just a photo of like a portrait style of just the musician. I want there to be some kind of action going on and movement and capture like that. So when I'm taking photos of live music and stuff, I'm trying to look at two things at the same time, kind of. I'm trying to look at like what the focal point is, and then also is it what's interesting going on in the back. Is it the drummer?
Yeah.
Is it if focus one or A is the singer or the guitar player? Who and what's behind them that I can move to kind of make it get both of them involved, you know?
If you were to pull up an example that you could describe for our audience of one of your favorites or something that you would consider a good or successful photo, would you be able to do that right now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me see.
As a photographer myself, I often like to refer to photography as good or successful. And there are times when you can accomplish both. But I think that it can be one or the other at times.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to what I enjoy out of it, right? Like, as a photographer, I understand the rule of thirds. I know balance, but I also know when I see something that's a hell of a lot of fun and it does not fall in any traditional visual aesthetic.
Yeah.
And I would consider that successful, but not, well, I would consider it good, but not necessarily successful. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like I don't know. I think there can be a difference there.
And with live music photography, like, thank God for digital. It's like, just throw the spaghetti at the wall.
Yeah.
Just keep shooting. Don't stop. But so this would be one example. I don't know if that's necessarily my favorite one, but just like how you notice the two guitar players up front, and then followed behind him is the drummer in the back, and you can kind of see him, and it gives this depth of field. So I'm always kind of trying to look for the thing that's closest, and then something that's far away that kind of gives it that feel like that.
Yeah. What would you say the role of color has in concert photography?
Well, that's a funny question. I'm colorblind. So I think some people are confused about what colorblind is. My doctor would say the better word for it is color deficiency. So like when they found out I was colorblind, because like in grade school, I colored the earth purple. My teacher was like, "What color is that, Derick?" And I was like, "It's blue, you know?" And like, "No, it's purple." So I see less of a spectrum. So I actually really like black and white photos the most. And also with just like we said, like there's no worse lighting than music photos.
Yeah.
So like it is definitely a challenge to like get good colored pictures sometimes. If your flash isn't strong enough to like wash those out. So colors are a difficult one for me. I struggle with them a lot. I post a lot of black and white. But you know, the flash is probably the handiest thing I have to try to like wash out and get like solid colors.
Yeah.
So.
When did you start implementing a flash into your
photography?
Actually, not right away.
Yeah.
At first, I didn't use flash because of fear of annoying the musicians.
But you knew it was a necessary
Yeah.
to accomplish the image.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I knew that eventually it became necessity. And then, through talking to the food truck guys, like Miles and stuff, he's also a photographer. He went to school for photography. And they're like, use a flash, like give it a shot. And so at first I was like timid with it and with the flash and stuff. And I didn't take as many photos. And then I started asking the bands either at the end of the set or if there was a break, and I'm like, how's the flash? Is that bothering you? And they're like, I don't even know what you're talking about. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it was all in my head. So now I definitely like use the flash all the time.
Yeah.
Some of the bigger venues though, like Ryan Susko got me a photo pass for the Movements and Turnover show that was just in town. And you're actually not allowed to we weren't allowed to use flash for that show. They told us no flash, and we were only allowed to be up there for the first 3 songs. So there's a lot more pressure with that.
Yeah.
I think so.
Considering the more technical aspect for our listeners, when it comes to taking photos, there's ISO, there's shutter speed, and there's f-stop. And you can get, the same brightness by adjusting all of your settings in different ways. But with a flash, a lot of flashes greatly diminish your shutter speed, right? So, I'll pick the arbitrary number of 500 that I've seen on a number of them. For environments where there's a lot of action, 500 can still sometimes get blurry.
Yeah.
So for you as someone who's shooting a lot of these high action environments, who's now using a flash and maybe limited there, how do you use clarity or things like blur from a movement perspective to your advantage?
Sometimes the mistakes make really good photos, honestly. But for me, it's like a trade-off between just like jacking the ISO like really high, put the f-stop at like an 8.
Yeah.
Because like I said, I like to take pictures of more than just the first thing we're focusing on. I want multiple things, so that make sure that I don't blur out anyone or anything in the background that I want to be part of the photo. But yeah, it's mostly the jacking that ISO up without it getting too noisy.
Makes sense.
But I've read and been told, and I've found more confidence that the customer, however you want to call it, whatever you want to call them, would rather prefer a little slightly noisier picture than something blurry.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I found. It's something a little more easier to mess with.
Yeah, for sure.
Post.
Makes sense.
So.
And what does your post process look like for these? Like, what do you allow yourself to do from out of the camera to delivery?
I'm not much of a technical guy. I want to learn more. I think my weak point is technology. I not only am I not good at it, I have not much interest in it. It gets me frustrated really easily. So like, yeah, I even have I have a physical counter I write down on because I don't even like to use computer stuff for that. But so I just keep it pretty simple. I just, I mess with the lighting and the exposure and, darks and shadows and stuff like that. I really, I need to work more on practicing that stuff in Lightroom. But there's not too much technicality for me, at least yet.
Yeah.
But luckily I have my dad. He's knows his stuff inside and out. Like, he actually teaches photography classes back home as well. So I'm pretty spoiled having him for any questions like that. Or sometimes I will send him a photo. I'm like, is there something you can do with this that I can't figure out? You know? So I'm very fortunate to have a teacher as my dad. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
In a day where cameras are so present, right? Everybody has a camera on their phone. A lot of people that identify as photographers have never actually seen their work printed and in front of them.
Yeah.
And I know you've mentioned that your dad helps you with framing, and so that makes me think that you've seen a lot of your work printed before.
Yeah.
So what has been the process of experiencing your work in a printed medium rather than just a digital medium?
It's more intimate. You know, I like having it hanging around we have a few hanging in the truck stop, you know, where I live at the food truck house. And I like doing like galleries and stuff because it gives you, it's like almost like a holiday, you know, like during the holidays or like a birthday, like all your friends and family show up and there are people that normally wouldn't be all in the same room if it wasn't for this event. Like that's kind of how like I see like art shows and stuff like that. So it's fun way to have like people and stuff like that. And it's just a more intimate thing, you know.
Yeah.
And I think we're starting to, with technology, people getting sick of not having to hold things in your hand, and we're going back to that. Like I'm seeing bands like having CDs and stuff. You know, I'm slightly older. I'm not old. I'm older, but you know, the CDs and cassettes and stuff coming back. You know, records have been pretty popular for like a little bit longer, but now it's like CDs and stuff like that. I think people want to hold something in their hand.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, when the apocalypse happens and the world comes crashing down, you'll still have your physical media.
So physical media.
Oh, yeah.
I love my food truck CD in my car.
Oh, man.
If people want to find your work online or if they want to see you in action, where can they find out about what you're up to next?
Honestly, everything's done through Instagram. Tumbleweed_photographer. I don't have a website. I'm going to work on that.
Yeah.
In the future. I have an Etsy if anyone wants to buy prints, but they can also just direct message me on Instagram.
Awesome.
So that's really where they can find me.
Very good.
Yeah.
I like that. It's very instantaneous.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
Good. Well, Derick, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks for having me. This was so much fun.
Good.
I really enjoyed this. So.
Derick, thank you so much for coming in today. We are very excited to announce that the next exhibition at the gallery at Steel Pixel Studios will be a solo show featuring the incredible street photography and band photography of Tumbleweed photographer, aka Derick Fiedler. This show will be opening on December 14th from 6 to 9 p.m. At the opening, we will have performances by Miles of Food Truck, Wyatt of Feltright, and Kaylee of Mars Council. Come, hang out, and listen to these incredible performances and see this amazing collection of photography taken from all around the world. We hope to see you there.
Thanks for tuning in to the Lehigh Valley Arts Podcast. Don't forget to like the podcast, leave us a review, and follow us on both social media and streaming services at Lehigh Valley Arts Podcast.